Welcome to the Mischief Maker broadcast, where chaos, creativity, and common sense collide. Your host, Joel Freeman, was kicked out of high school in Alberta, Canada. He left home at 17 and hitchhiked around North America as a long-haired hippie and dope-smoking fool. He made a 180-degree change, becoming one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. As a professional speaker, Joel has traveled to well over 55 countries. His many books have been published in 28 foreign translations. Pieces from his Black History collection have been seen by millions at the United Nations and many other venues. And now, the Chief Mischief Maker himself, Dr. Joel A. Freeman.
Hey, Baby Joel here. Guess what? The older version of myself is writing a book on reverse psychology. Please don't buy it. There we are with Baby Joel with a little more wisdom that's transcendent of time. Well, tonight we have a very special guest. His name is Pete Babcock. And I'll just share this with you. Chuck Cooper III said this about Pete. He says, basketball. He says, basketball has always been more than just a game. It has served as a mirror of our society, a battleground for justice, and a bridge between divided communities. Few individuals have embodied the truth more completely than Pete Babcock. Now, tonight, we're going to have Pete. He's been in the NBA for about 42 years. He was a scout, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Assistant coach, director of player personnel, vice president of basketball operations. He was also general manager, president, minority owner, and I'm sure I'm missing something here, a fan, and just... You're going to really enjoy this evening. He just finished a book, just released, called The Courts of Justice, A Life of Basketball and Activism. So before we do that, there's a song that I wrote. It's called Business Partner Blues. It might not have a whole lot of relevance to our discussion this evening, but enjoy it. Mel, let's go with the song.
Started out dreaming, hands in the air. Worked hard to build something, a vision to share. Attacked hell with squirt guns, thought we were tough. But business and friendship, wow, it can get rough. Then came the dollars, along with the doubt. Late night worries and figures to count. One was saving, the other was spending. Both knew that their trust in the other was bending. The lawyers on standby, papers to sign. Friendship eroded, $1 at a time. Or was it the greed? Maybe just two different versions of me. But there's a way to stand the test, to keep a friendship and not make a mess. Write it all down, be clear and wise. Take on the deal, but don't close your eyes. Respect the roles, don't cross the lane. Split the profit, split the pain. If trust gets thin, step back, reset. Cause friendship's a fortune you don't wanna bet. The best way to ruin a bond that's true is to mix in money and gaslight the view. If you wanna stay friends and make make money together, be humble and smart, and respect God forever. Don't cross the lane, split the profit, split the pain. If trust gets thin, step back, reset. 'Cause friendship's a fortune you don't wanna bet. The best way to ruin a bond that's true is to mix in money and gaslight the view. If you wanna stay friends and make money together, be humble and smart and respect God forever.
Well, that's a song that I wrote probably, this is the third time Robert is saying. Robert, I apologize. We tried to work out another song, but you are very astute. And I thank you for sharing that you heard this for the third time. And you might hear it a fourth, but not next week. By the way, like Robert just wrote in, you'll see at the top of the screen, there's a QR code. And that is a way for you to get in touch with our guest tonight, Pete Babcock, and also a way for you to learn more about what is a mischief maker. A lot of people ask, how do you define a mischief maker? Well, rather than repeating it every night, go to the QR code. And if you can't access the QR code because you're on your cell phone, then it's called chiefmischiefmaker.com. 3 words, chiefmischiefmaker.com. And that'll take you directly to this link tree with all kinds of information. And of course, most of all, to learn more about our guest. And also the gentleman who does the voice over in the beginning and the end, the intro and outro. He's a dear friend. And if you need any intro work, boom, he's the guy. And anyway, tonight, I want you to if you're, one of the benefits of being a live viewer is that you're able to ask questions. And so if I am missing something, you are my, the gentlemen and ladies who are out there, you're the ones that can help to bring, be my safety net, if you will. And you can help me to help with the show if you have any questions that I'm missing tonight. So let's bring on Pete Babcock. Pete, there you are.
Hey, Joel.
Welcome. Welcome. Now, you're in Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, we're in Newport, Rhode Island. That was, by the way, that was a beautiful song. That was,
oh my.
You got a lot of talent. a lot of different directions. I mean, that was impressive.
Well, it's just one of just coming out with an album called Empty the Library Within. And it's actually to bring the spotlight back on you, is that you are emptying the library that's within you for your family in writing this book. And I want to get to that in just a little bit. But I wanted to kind of step back in time, just a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up, and what kind of sponsored your interest in basketball?
Well, that's a great question. I was born in Bangor, Maine, and my dad was in the service at the time in the Air Force, and we moved frequently. So we moved all over the country: Bangor, Maine, Manchester, New Hampshire, Moses Lake, Washington, Nashville, Tennessee, Syracuse, New York, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Arizona. So that was all by the 7th grade.
Wow.
So I didn't really have an interest in basketball. My first competitive sport was swimming. And it was at the YMCA in Colorado Springs. And one of my friends was his mother was the coach of the swim team, and so they invited me to come try out for the swim team, and I did, and so I swam. That was my first competitive sport from age 9 to 12, and then we moved to Phoenix, and still basketball wasn't. I wasn't focused on basketball at all. I started late. My first serious playing of basketball was probably in the 8th grade, and we had a math teacher in our school who decided to coach the basketball team. Wonderful man. Didn't know a whole lot about basketball particularly, but he knew more than we did, and he taught us what he could teach, and then we'd play in these outdoor courts, and then I started getting into. I started thinking about it more because I was at that point when I was in the 8th grade. I think I was 6'2", and so I was one of the taller kids in school. And so then going into my freshman year in high school, I thought this is something I really ought to focus on. So I started working towards the game and working out and getting ready to try to make the freshman team, which I did, and then it just kind of blossomed. I mean, I fell in love with the game. So really, it was my freshman year in high school where I fell in love with the game, and much of it was due to the coaches that we had. We had a terrific coach. His name was Carl Rollins. He was the head football coach, but he coached freshman basketball, and he was the first person to teach me how to be a competitive athlete, how to prepare mentally and physically, because he took everything very seriously. And then each year, then at the end of my freshman year, the most impactful coach probably that I ever had was a man named Royce Urey, and he was the junior varsity coach at the high school, but he ran the summer league. He took me under his wing that summer at the end of our freshman year, and he worked with me every day. I'd go to the gym and spend the whole day in the gym, and he would work with me on individual things. And then, we'd play games on the summer league. And then I made the all-star team, which was made up of players from all classes, freshmen through seniors. And to this day, I credit him for that. I think he had something to do with making sure I made the all-star team, just to help motivate me. And I still have the trophy to this day. He passed away sadly last year, but I kept in touch with him over the years, and he was really touched by the fact I still had the trophy, and he had me send a picture of me holding the trophy when I was I was 14 years old. But he's one of these people that just motivated you. You wanted to play well for him, and you wanted to just maximize your potential. That's he really. And then he left to go to a brand new high school as the head coach, so never got to play for him. And then my varsity coach Jerry Waugh just furthered my interest in the game. So really, freshman year in high school is when it kind of clicked, and the passion for the game developed.
We have people from all around the world watching right now, and basketball is touching every part of the planet. As a youngster, you were in, like you mentioned, Bangor, Maine, and Colorado Springs, all these different places. What's the upside and the downside of let's say being in a different school every year and trying to make friends, trying to fit in? What were the positives and the negatives of that have helped to inform you in who you are as an adult?
Well, Joel, my parents, looking back on it, did a wonderful job of preparing us to move. We moved almost every 2 years. And when I say they did a wonderful job, they turned into an adventure. It was never like a sad thing to be leaving. It was an adventure going to someplace new. And so we always look, and I had 2 younger brothers. So a couple of things came out of it. One was learning to view that next move as a real positive, unexplored adventure. And the other was that my brothers and I became extremely close because we were together all the time, even though we had new friends every 2 years. Well, we had the three of us together. And that stayed the way the rest of our lives because all three of us ended up in the NBA. So we all work in the same industry. Because of that, we got to share an awful lot. We traveled together. We competed against one another in different teams. But probably the negative was that there was I won't say there wasn't a sense of stability because there was, because our parents just did an amazing job of bringing us up and developing the value system and what was really important in life. So I never look back on it and thinking that in any sense any of it was ever negative. It was all positive. But you did change, so you don't. Some people, like I live in Newport now. I have cousins in Newport I have a cousin who's my age, 76 years old. He was born and raised on the island we live on and never left other than he went to serve in the Navy. And after that, he was back here, never left. And his kids all grew up here and his grandkids are growing up here. And so I never had that kind of situation, where you grow up someplace and everybody in town, known them for all your life. We didn't quite have that, but I never looked at it as really a negative. It was, again, it goes back to my parents and, just the amazing job that they did.
I found, as a youngster, we moved a fair amount, and it was a situation where I would come to a new school, and one of the techniques I used, I don't know if it was a technique at the time I was thinking, but I would bring gum to stick Wrigley gum. And then I would say, hey, you want to stick a gum? And just kind of opening up the doorway to talk for them to look at me like, hey, this guy's kind of cool. He's giving me a stick of gum for today. Yeah. And that's back when you could chew gum in schools. Yeah, right. But that was my way of connecting with people. And I think it helped in my adult life to be more adaptable in situations, traveling. A lot of people freak out when you can't get on the plane. I just sit down and I'm writing a book, or I'm coming up with something else and use it as an opportunity. Is that kind of some of the things that help to bring some flexibility in your life, you think?
Yeah, I probably, I never tried to overanalyze it and look at it in any great detail, but I'm sure that the learning to adapt to new situations helped. I also became, I remember talking my parents into letting me go to a sleepover camp in Colorado Springs when I was 8 or 9. I can't remember. And they kept telling me I was too young. And finally talked them into it. They let me go. And I was the most homesick kid in the camp probably they ever had. And I wasn't allowed to go home. So I had to stay the whole week. And I can remember to this day how homesick I was the entire week.
Wow.
And sitting at the gates where the camp was up in the mountains in Colorado, just outside of Colorado Springs, waiting for the family car to show up. When I saw the family car, I was all of a sudden relaxed. I was okay. And so growing up, I had an issue with that. When I was in the Boy Scouts, and we'd have a weekend camp out plan that I'm all excited about it and talking about it all week. I can't wait to go. That it would come to my parents. My parents were going to take me to meet, the scout troop at Friday evening after school to leave to go on the camp out. I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And my scoutmaster figured out that it was more an issue of being separated from my family than it was being away from home, because he did something that I don't know how he came up with this, but my youngest brother Rob was in the Cub Scouts. He said, well, what if we can arrange to have your brother Rob come too?
Wow.
And so Rob did. I was fine.
Boy, how intuitive for that.
So it wasn't actually being away from home. It
Yeah.
was separation anxiety because
Yeah.
my brothers and I grew up so close with one another, and we had each other through all these moves, and we relied on each other. We did everything together. And then all of a sudden I was away from them. So when they allowed Rod to come with me, I was perfectly fine. Had no
That's
problem
great.
whatsoever. So it was really a separation anxiety that it took me a while to get over because I had kind of programmed my mind to anytime I was away from them, I was going to have this feeling.
Mm-hmm. Now in the NBA, you did everything except wash dishes and clean toilets. I mean, you were maybe you
Yeah.
did that too for all I know. But
Yeah.
you were a scout. And I remember sitting down with, I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but he was what they called a super scout for the Bullets way back when. I can still see his face. And we were sitting together watching the game.
Bill Gardner, maybe?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was asking him, I said, what do you look for in a player
Yeah.
when you're going out scouting? And he said to me something that I found very interesting. Of course, it was all about the family, next door neighbors, the background check, all these different things about the players, the ability, of course, of the player. But he said something interesting. He says, I watch to see them sitting on the bench when they're not playing, to see if they're in the game. If they're only in the game when they're on the court, I'm not interested. I want to see them in the game when they're sitting on the bench.
Right.
Any tips, any things that you were looking for when you were
Well,
scout?
Yeah, and I'd agree with Bill, and I got to know Bill pretty well because Bob Ferry was one of my closest friends, and so I knew Bill very well through Bob, and I'd agree with that. I would go to games early. I'd get there like an hour and a half before game time because I wanted to watch players, their body language warming up, how seriously they were taking it, how they interacted with their teammates, just warming up on the floor. And then the same thing as Bill said, I try to watch them on playing on the floor, on sitting on the bench, how they supported their teammates, how they interacted with them during the game, how they interacted with the referees. You're looking for all that. And in the NBA is such, the players are so highly skilled and such special athletes that like the number one criteria is athletically, does this player have the ability to play in the NBA? Because the speed, quickness, and all that is off the charts. And then they had to have at least one NBA skill. They had to be an NBA shooter, NBA rebounder, an NBA defender. They had to be something that transferred to the NBA. Now the stars could do more than one thing, but the stars were easy to find, because they'd stick out. You'd see Michael Jordan, you say, well, he's going to be a good NBA player. Those weren't hard. The hard ones were when you're looking for that guy that he's not that talented, but does he have an NBA skill that can be used in an NBA game? And then the background stuff was critical for all of us. But Bill was terrific. He was great to talk to and learn from.
I enjoyed so many conversations with him.
Yeah,
and Bob Ferry also. And when we get offline, I can tell you some stories about Bob.
I can tell you some too. That's right.
Now, when you're a general manager or coach and you have to let a player go, what's going on in your mind? And it's all a business. It's entertainment business.
Right.
But I was as chaplain, I'd get the calls from the players saying, I'm in Golden State. I just got the call. Where do you want us to send your stuff? Maybe it was in January, February, whenever that time came when that 1 year contract, you could let somebody go. And some of the guys were in tears, just like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
What was happening on your end on how you approach that?
Yeah, you have to, if you're in a position to run a franchise, your responsibility is to do what's best for the franchise, short-term and long-term both. So when it came to making a trade, and you're telling a player, we're trading you to so-and-so, you had to pull the trigger and just sit down and be honest with them and tell them exactly what you're doing. And they were always difficult conversations. The that's the trade scenario, which is not as severe as the cutting scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So the trade scenario, the player's still making a living and moving on to another team, but there were some that were really emotional trades because some GMs tried real hard not to get close to their players because they thought it made it more difficult to cut a player or trade a player if you were close personally. I took the position, whether it was right or not, I don't know, but I took the position that I'm going to enjoy my time with the players while they're here.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 months. That I don't know the answer to, but I'm not going to keep my distance.
Yeah.
I'm going to enjoy getting to know them, their families. We're going to interact. We always had the players over to our house every Christmas and had a
Mm-hmm.
Christmas party, and our radio guy, Steve Holman, would dress up as Santa Claus, and he's got a great sense of humor. He would do gag gifts, and it was basically a roast of everybody in the organization, players, coaches, GM, everybody. But I wanted to have those interactions and build like a family unit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was harder to pull the trigger, but you still had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting a player like out of training camp is typically when you're cutting a player. You might cut a player before the trade before the cut down date, or because contracts, you would have contracts with players who are a minimum make good contracts. They become guaranteed on a certain date, usually shortly after Christmas, and you would sometimes have to cut players right before that.
Wow.
And it's difficult. I mean, it's because you're dealing with somebody's livelihood and their family, and you try to reach out and help them any way you can help them, and offer the support and say, look, we can help you, hook on with somebody else. If you need recommendations, we can make calls for you. If you want to play overseas, we've got contacts overseas. So you try to soften it somehow. But yeah, they're hard calls to make because you're dealing with people's lives.
Yes. Now, when you moved to the front office, what were some of the things that you learned in that transition? When you're in a more of a managerial type of situation.
Well, when I moved from the bench to the front office, when you're on the bench, your goal is to win tonight's game.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like uppermost in your mind. We got to win tonight's game, and they win tomorrow night's game. And so you're not, it's not that you're not thinking long-term about the franchise, but your immediate goal is right now, because that's how you stay employed in professional basketball, is by winning games. So pretty simple formula. You move into the front office, and now you're responsible for putting that puzzle together.
Yeah.
And so now it's a little bigger picture, and you also want to win that game that night as the GM, but not to the detriment of being a good team 3 or 4 years from now. So you didn't want to mortgage away your future to win tonight, unless it's going to win you a championship. I mean, so there's always that balance. If you can make a move that makes you a championship contender right now, but it's not going to be good for you in 4 years, that's one thing. But normally those trades aren't making you a championship contender. It's just, do you get to a degree better, and don't mortgage away all your future draft picks, give them all away, to try to hit a home run tonight. If that home run is a guy that's 33 years old and has only a couple years left to play. So you're just looking at the whole puzzle and balancing both the short term and the long term. And that's why in the NBA, sadly, you have some animosity that builds up in some organizations between coaching staffs and the head and the front office, because they're looking at things a little differently. And so what you really work hard at is having bringing both groups together, so you're thinking alike and you're existing as like a family unit, as the coaching staff and the player personnel people. sadly, in the NBA, there are numerous franchises where that doesn't happen, and coaches and GMs don't like one another. They don't. Even though the GM may hire the coach, within a certain amount of time, they're kind of butting heads. So, fortunately, in our situation, in my life, my career, didn't really have that happen. But we had really good people who were in the coaching positions.
That's great. We're going to take a break for our sponsor, Rosetta Universe. And so, Mel, if you would play that right now.
As a modern metaphor for cracking codes in 7 steps, problem solving is less complex.
Well, that's a jingle that I wrote and produced about this thing called the Rosetta Universe. And basically what we're doing is this whole program, Mischief Maker Show, is being sponsored by the Rosetta Universe. We are taking this ancient artifact, the Rosetta Stone, and transforming it into a modern metaphor for problem solving. If you go to the QR code above, there's a link tree. The #1 point on the link tree is about the Rosetta Universe. Take some time to take a look at it. Smokey Robinson's on our advisory board, Kathy Hughes, just a host of people, and I think you'll find it very fascinating. Now, right now, I want to turn back to Pete. And Pete, just a quick story about Bob Ferry, general manager. By the way, over 20 seasons with the Wizards, I survived 6 coaching changes and 3 GM changes, which to me is the biggest miracle of all, because coaches and GMs, when they come in, they want to clear the deck. And especially if someone is really connected to the players, that is sometimes viewed as a threat. But one time I was flying down to speak in Dallas, and I looked over and there was Bob Ferry, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Rev, how you doing?" And I said, "Oh, doing great." And we started talking. Well, he was happy because his son had put him in first class because he's going down to scout out a player. And he says that's rare because he came from the old school, of basketball where you big, tall guys with knees bumping into the seat in front of them. And so when the seatbelt sign went down, I went up front from the cheap seats to where he was, and the seat next to him was empty. He says, "Sit down." So I said, "Okay." And for about 2.5 hours down to Dallas from Baltimore, we talked. And I asked him, I said, "Bob, I was just a young kid, 25. I look 15. What were you thinking about me?" And he says, "I was scared of you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" Because I was one of the first chaplains, as you know, and there's nothing before that, to know a previous experience. He says, "Because you're messing with their minds an hour before tip-off. And my job depends on how well these players play. And there's so many other people that depend on that." And so we had a great time. And he says, "I actually went up to the door to listen to you, because if you're saying something squirrely, something stupid in there, I was going to come bust right in, grab you by the scruff of your neck, and haul you out of the arena to never return again." And I said, "I'm glad you didn't tell me back then. I would have freaked out." Now, tell me a little bit about your relationship with people working with the players and the positive and negative impacts that they had on the players and how you dealt with it.
Well, we had a program called Life Experiences Program, and I wanted to expose our players to as many things outside of basketball as possible as an educational component and help them prepare for life in general. So we tried to expose our players to a variety of different people, and we were lucky because we had chaplains on who were chaplains that worked with us that were terrific. They all were good. Andrew Lang, one of our former players,
Yeah.
became a chaplain with the Hawks,
Mm-hmm.
and so those relationships are always positive and always good. And it was a player's decision whether he wanted to be involved with a chapel service or not, or just to get together before games. But we would try to bring all kinds of people in. We brought in John Lewis and became a good friend and worked with him for about 14 years on a number of programs.
Congress. Yeah.
And John was one of the original civil rights leaders and freedom riders. And John never turned me down when I asked him to come and speak to the team or spend time with them. And he'd have breakfast with us when we played in Washington. When he was back in Atlanta, we would, he would come and visit with the team. And I said, just talk to him about whatever you think is relevant at the time, whether he would share his experiences with Dr. King. And I just wanted our players to hear, from people like that. Andrew Young would come and speak with the team, Joseph Lowry. When we played in the West Coast, I would call John Wooden, and I had gotten to know him when I was with the San Diego Clippers. He invited Paul Silas, Bill Westfall, and that was our basketball staff, to walk with them every day at noon in the summertime at his basketball camp in San Diego. So every day for 1 hour, we had almost like a personal coaching clinic with Coach Wooden. So from that relationship,
wow.
I would call him when we played in the West Coast and said, would you come have lunch with us? And again, address the team about anything that you think is topical. And he never said no. He always did it. And these individuals, most of them had books that were current. And so we would buy copies of that person's book and, get them, they'd be all autographed to the players. And we just tried to expose our players to as many different sources of information. When I got fired in Atlanta, we had two things lined up. One was John McCain, to not talk really politics, but talk about being a prisoner of war, and how he mentally dealt with all that and survived it. And Maya Angelou. We had those lined up, and then I got fired, and it fell apart. It didn't work. But again, it was just reaching out to different people who different life experiences, so they would share those experiences with our guys, in addition to former players. Alex English would come in and speak with the team, and Thad Lever and Casey Jones spend a lot of time with us. So just reaching out to different people who would be resources and help educate our players.
We have a Danny Coletti. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly, Danny. Pete, which NBA player most surprised you as he excelled and you didn't see it coming? And when you're done with this, I want to get into your book, but I want to take a little pass in through the impact of the YMCA and the impact on the NBA. So which player?
Wow, that is really a great question. Over 42 years, there were a number of them. I would say that, when in the drafts, in 42 years of being involved with different drafts, I don't think anybody really had the corner on genius. We always used to try to figure out what teams did the best job drafting. And there were teams that did better than other teams, but we all made our share of mistakes, and we all sometimes hit home runs, surprisingly. Boy, there's a number of them that exceeded my expectations. Mark Price, I thought was a really good, solid college player, but I wasn't really sure he was transferred to the NBA, and I was wrong. I mean, more than transferred, he was a really, really outstanding NBA player. John Stockton, it grew on me. I went to see John Stockton play against the University of San Diego. First time I saw him play, and he had a nice game. He was John Stockton, just making the right plays and making the right passes. His team wins the game. And I left thinking that, he's a nice college player at this level. Not really thinking that much about the NBA. Then the Olympic trials were held that year in Bloomington, Indiana. Bobby Knight was coaching the team. And so all of us in the NBA were there to watch the trials. And now I'm watching Stockton play against all these really good college players. This is before pros could play in the Olympics. So I'm watching him play against all the best college players in the country. And he's doing the same thing he did against the University of San Diego. And I thought, well, maybe he's a little better than I thought. But I still wasn't sure that he was going to be like an impactful NBA player. And then, all of a sudden he plays in the NBA and you're going like, he's doing the same thing against the University of San Diego. It doesn't matter who he's playing against. He does the same thing against everybody. So I don't know if there's one player. I mean, it's a great question. I have to give it a lot of thought, but I don't. There's one player that jumps out at me, but there's a number of them that exceeded my expectations. And there were others where I thought would be pretty good players that, ended up not being as good as I thought they could be. So it's an inexact science when you're selecting players, but and we all try to make it an exact science, but it's not.
Danny, thank you so much, and thank you, Pete. When it comes to the players, I remember, I mean, most every player who made the NBA that I've talked with, they can refer to people in college, high school that were far better than them, technically and physically. Yet they couldn't handle the mental game. Can you talk to that a little bit about the mental game and how that connects with their skill?
Sometimes people will say, I'll hear people say that, I don't watch the NBA that much during the regular season because they're kind of on cruise control and they don't really care that much about whether they win or lose until the playoffs. And then that's when they really turn it up and they compete. And every time I hear that, I think to myself, did I miss something in the 42 years I was around? Because every team I was with, every player I was with, their goal that night was to have the best game of their life. I mean, that's how they thought. They were so highly motivated as competitors. There's like a notch above everybody else. So they wanted to win that game, and they wanted to go out and have the best game of their life tonight. Now, it didn't always happen, but that's how they prepared mentally to play. And that I never saw players I was around who were on cruise control. I mean, they took such great pride in what they were doing that they weren't going to go out and go half speed. I mean, it may seem that way sometimes to some fans, but because the number, the crazy number of games that we play, but that if it looks like they're on cruise control, it's more physical than mental, because mentally they want to play, they want to perform. If you played a professional athlete, if you play him in ping pong, he wants to beat you. That's the mentality. That's the mentality, right? Yeah. I mean, they're not doing it recreationally. They're doing it to win. They're doing it to win. I remember I used to run the Adams Westfall basketball camp in Phoenix. Paul Westfall and Alvin Adams, and they called these guys roomed together on the road when they played for the Phoenix Suns, and it was back when everybody had roommates and you didn't have your own room, and they called them the Parker Brothers because they just played games constantly, and they would take games on the road. I'm talking board games, everything, all kinds of games to compete with one another, and they wanted to win, playing Monopoly, playing whatever it was that they wanted to win that game. That's just how they're wired. It's that's one of the things that makes the professional athletes so exceptional. Is the mental mindset is so different.
Yeah, Wes Unseld once told me, he says, you have to have a big ego to play at this level. And once you subset, the word ego sometimes has a negative connotation, but the whole idea of having a big confidence. And then he followed up, he says, I think he said, or you're going to end up on a poster. If you're going up against Michael Jordan and you don't think you can take him, you're going to end up on a poster at that time in Kmart, with Michael's tongue hanging out and he's all over you. And,
right.
And so, it's just a whole different mindset. What about today? Back in the day, people, let's say a player had a bad game, and but today you got Twitter, or X, you have all these different social media, and if someone misses, and they're a franchise player, they're making the big bucks, which a lot of people don't know that there's a very tiny percentage of people are making the big bucks guaranteed, and everyone else is on a 1-year or 10-day contract. And so but almost instantly, the social media goes crazy if someone misses a slam dunk, and it's like, we're paying this guy this big bucks, and he's screwing up the game or whatever it is. Yeah. Speak to that, the difference that has happened, the transition, to social media and everything, and the impact on the player and the team, on the general manager and everybody.
Well, the social pressure is so much greater, I think, today than it was back. When I was first started in the NBA, there was no talk radio in sports. That developed while I was in the NBA, and I remember the first talk radio shows. I was in Denver. Maybe not the very first ones, but some of the early ones. Irv Brown and I can't remember his partner's name, but anyway, they had a talk show in Denver, but the tone was so different. Like, Irv would call me during the day and say, well, on the show tonight or this afternoon, we're going to recommend that you make this trade that we know is totally ridiculous. If you did this trade, we would think it's the worst thing in the world. But we're going to propose this trade to generate calls, right? So I said, fine, it's your show. What are you going to do? It wasn't. They weren't going after you.
It wasn't mean-spirited.
No, not at all. Yeah. It wasn't mean-spirited, and there was no social media. So today, I think players deal with so much more scrutiny. Because, again, like what you said, somebody makes one mistake in the game, and it gets blown up out of proportion, and it gets played over and over and over again on ESPN and these highlights and bloopers things, and everybody's talking about it. You got to have a certain amount of mental toughness, to not let that bother you mentally. And a good number of professional athletes do. They have a really exceptional mental toughness, and there are some that it's hard for them. They lose their confidence, and and it really hurts their game.
Now let's turn a gentle corner here, and I want us to talk about your book. Can you kind of explain a little bit about the catalyst behind this book, and kind of give the average listener or viewer a little kind of a quick overview of what the book is all about and how it would benefit them, even if they're not into basketball?
Oh, I appreciate it. So the genesis of the book was my kids. I have 2 daughters who encouraged me to write my stories, a lot of the behind the scenes things that happened in my career that people really weren't aware of, controversial trades, and just things that happened that people didn't know about, and to leave those stories for their kids, for my grandchildren.
Oh, that's great.
And so that was the genesis of starting this. So I began keeping a journal, and when I was traveling, I started this like in 1995, I think, and I was flying back from a scouting trip in Europe. So I had a lot of time on a plane, so I began journaling. And I started keeping that journal and chronicling, crazy things that would happen that nobody ever to this day really knew about. We just kept them in the journal. So then I began to put it all together in the form of a book. And one of my very close friends was Red Auerbach's biographer, Ken Dooley, who's 93 years of age and still writes today. And he said, I was telling him about it. And he said, "Can I read it?" I said, "Sure, no problem. I'm happy to have you read it." So he reads it, and he calls me. He says, "No, you got to do more with this than what you're planning on doing just for your kids and grandkids. There's stories here that need to be told." And he said that, so he kind of lit a fire under me to get things moving. And so I rewrote the book with a different twist. So this is two parts to the book. The first part of the book deals with my passion of studying civil rights and the game of basketball and how they fed off one another. So the book starts off with a history of black basketball and how over time, over a number of years, the game of basketball brought races together, broke down barriers racially and culturally, and then gets to a point where the league actually integrates in 1950 after being an all-white league. And the behind-the-scenes stories of how that all happened. And the second part of the book is about my life experiences from birth right through to the end of my career and to today, actually, and how my interest in basketball developed, as I told you earlier in the show, but also how my interest in the civil rights movement developed. So I was a student during the 1960s, and every night on TV, I'm watching, protests go on, and, these nonviolent protests, and you're watching these protesters being fire hosed and beaten. They're not doing anything. They're not violent. They're not fighting back. When you're thinking this, so that got my attention. And so it just kept building. And then I had a chance to work with Jesse Owens on the board of the Phoenix Urban League for 1970 and 1980. And he became, a real inspiration to me and kept building my passion about this. And I was teaching American history at the time at the high school level. So I introduced Black history into my U.S. history class at a predominantly white high school, and got good feedback about it. So I didn't get any pushback at all. And then as I got into the NBA, I got to work with, as I said before, John Lewis and Andrew Young and other civil rights leaders. And so the second half of the book talks about all that, and also gets into things that were happening behind the scenes, so that people to this day probably have never heard of and didn't realize what was going on. And also tied in with each one of those chapters of my life, I deal with what's happening in our country at that time. So from a racial perspective. So
that's brilliant.
While I'm talking about my high school years, this is what's happening racially in our country. Here are protests that are going on. Here's lynchings that are happening. So I tie that into kind of each generation as I go through and tell the story, which fed more of my interest in the activism aspect of it. And then the programs that we started in basketball, I tried to. My goal was I looked at the league like this: one team wins a championship every year. So I thought, well, you can't just have one winner and 29 losers, So if you don't short of winning a championship, what have you achieved? So I thought, well, what can we do in the community to reach underserved segments of the community, and how can we use the game to do that? And so I tell stories in there about, like, when I'm in Denver, we developed a huge gang problem. Gang members were being given one-way bus tickets from Los Angeles to Denver and dumped in Denver. And so Denver inherited this gang problem that started in LA. And So I remember sitting around thinking, like, what can we do as the Denver Nuggets to help with this problem? So I went into the gang neighborhoods in the daytime and started walking around and meeting people. And I wanted to find somebody who had the attention of the different gang members, the opposing gangs. And there was this guy, Leon Kelly, Reverend Kelly. He was an ex-con who had devoted his life to trying to stop violence between young people. And I meet Leon, and I said, Leon, what Leon would do is every night he would walk the neighborhoods. Cell phones hadn't started yet. They had these great big mobile phones. Remember those great big things?
Oh, yes, yes.
Those were just coming out. But what would happen is he would walk the neighborhoods and he'd get a call at a house, and somebody would run out and say, "Hey, Reverend Kelly, there's a fight ready to break out over in the corner of such and such." So he would run over there. And so I said, Leon, can I walk with you at night through the neighborhoods and meet these kids? And he said, well, you can if you want to. I said, well, I'll have you with me. I'm not going to do it by myself. And he was my size. He was 6'6" and like 235, and and big, strong guy. And so I would walk with him one night a week. And he'd introduced me to these kids. And what I found was, at first, kids were like really defensive, like, who's this white guy coming into our neighborhood, but the minute he introduced me as the general manager of the Denver Nuggets, the wall went down.
Wow.
And
that's something, the power.
Yeah. And the kids, I'd say 90% of the kids, some of them it didn't make any difference, but 90% of the kids, the wall went down immediately, and they changed their tone totally. And they were saying, hey, tell us what Alex Inglis is like, what Calvin Nat, Fat Lever, tell us what they're like, what the Nuggets, this, that. And so I would get to know the kids and use basketball as the vehicle to reach them. And after about a month of walking through the neighborhoods and meeting these kids, I said to Leon, all right, here's my next idea. That's maybe crazy, but I want you to bring 2 opposing gang members to a game. And you bring them, and you guys sit with me down in my seats behind the bench.
Wow.
And,
oh, my goodness. That's powerful.
So he said, all right, let's try it. So he would bring 2 opposing gang members. I'd take them to dinner in our arena club, which is a restaurant for our season ticket holders. Then I'd take them in the locker room to meet our players, interact with them, come into my office and hang out before the game. They would sit with me during the game. And we had good and negative outcomes. We had the pluses were we actually had season ticket holders that sat around me. We got to know some of these kids. Excuse me. And they offered them jobs.
We got one minute left, by the way.
They offered these kids jobs. And some of these kids were able to help themselves. We had some negative things happen also. Excuse me. But anyway, try to use the vehicle of the game of basketball to reach underserved communities.
Wow, that is fantastic. I love hearing that. Oh, Pete Chance, I'm sorry, we're not going to, it's a great question, but we can't, we just don't have the time. We've got to go. Pete Babcock, thank you so much for taking time. Can you give us in 10 seconds what you want people to take away after they've read your book?
I would say the number one thing is respect others for their differences rather than discriminating due to those differences. That would be the number one thing. It's like respect others and for their differences, and don't discriminate because of those differences. I
love it. I love your heart. You're a good man.
Thanks,
good friend. Well, folks, we gotta move on here. I'm so sad this show is over. We have so much more. We have Bob Cutarella. He's you're going to love next week's show also. He's Grammy Award winning, multiple Grammy. You name the people over the last 30, 40 years. Love it. And so I got to say goodbye, good night, good day, wherever you're watching this. Ebity, that's all, folks.
You have just experienced another episode of the Mischief Maker broadcast. Hit the subscribe button. Connect at chiefmischiefmaker.com. Thanks for coming along for the ride. And hopefully, you are now a bit closer to becoming a mischief maker in your part of the world.